And a happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of JMU Sound Off. I am Jonathan McNamara coming to you from Richmond, Virginia. It's a bi-week edition of Sound Off. We're going to get to, though, a very important preview of all things Liberty this week, the official Battle of the Blue Ridge kickoff. We're going to welcome Bryson Gordon in from the News in Advance to help us break down what is a key matchup for JMU as we continue to try to build momentum as we head towards our Sunbelt slate. We're also going to have an off-topic conversation today about the one-time transfer portal window. And we're going to have a new segment on JMU Sound Off today. We're going to call it Kids Picks. We're going to let some kids give us their thoughts on the college football slate of games. You're not going to want to miss that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then, as always, we have some other news and notes from around the Sun Belt that we want to share, but we want to kick off tonight's episode. First of all, just by saying thank you to everyone for the positive response to last week's episode with Mike Barber. Really appreciate Mike's insight, giving us a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look of what it's like for beat reporters as they navigate the journeys that they have in terms of covering college coaches across the country. I thought it was a great discussion, but as always, we do appreciate the support. Want to start off by recognizing our sponsors, Skyline Financial Partners. Remember that you can empower your family for lasting financial success by visiting SkylineFinancialPartners.com. Want to give a shout out to Champions Drive Bourbon. Remember, you can find your bottle of Champions Drive at select ABC stores across Virginia at abc.virginia.gov. Where's Woody? Remember, 25% off their entire site for 48 hours after every Sound Off episode at where'swoody.com. Purple Nation store now with a location in Midlothian. The holiday season is right around the corner, and every Purple location is the best place to stock up on gifts for your JMU fans in your neighborhood. You can find stores in coastal Virginia as well as Midlothian, the west end of Richmond, and in northern Virginia, and as always at yourpurplenation.com. Shout out to Shoker Enterprises, the Dead Meat Society. You can join the movement for grilling enthusiasts at deadmeatsociety.com. Our friends at Outdoor Kitchen Creations take your outdoor kitchen to the next level at backyardtrends.com. And now this week, we want to welcome a new sponsor to the Sound Off family by going to Valley Road Vineyards. Be sure to stop up and see them when you're near Afton, Virginia. It is the official Virginia winery of JMU Sound Off. They are located right off I-64 in Harrisonburg. Tell them you heard about Valley Road on our JMU Sound Off podcast, and you'll receive 50% off your wine flight. So want to welcome them into the Sound Off family. As always, anytime we have a new sponsor, it's a good time for Sound Off. So once again, Valley Road Vineyards. And with that, we're going to bring on the rest of our Sound Off crew. Taylor Atkins, Michael Evangelista. Guys, I'm curious how you spent the bye week. Michael, I know you're down in sunny Florida. How's the weather down there? You're checking out some baseball games, I know, with your family.
I was going to say, I'm down in the St. Pete, Tampa area. I'll be down here for the next few weeks. All the nephews and nieces have baseball games, volleyball games, you name it. Shout out to the Hooks who are playing their tournament today in Bradenton. I think they're undefeated on the weekend, so go Hooks.
Awesome. Taylor, what about you? What'd you do? I know you're always busy. You've got a thousand different things.
We had kids soccer games, flag football games. And then last night, my buddy Trevor McBrien and the Roanoke downtown lunch bunch. It's a text thread. We get lunch together. But last night, we all watched the Old Dominion Monarchs play Virginia Tech, which by now, earlier today, everyone saw the news. That this is breaking news today. On Sound Off that Brent Pry has been let go as the head coach of Virginia Tech after going
back on the menu, boys.
In 24. I mean, you know, they canceled the games down in Norfolk because they couldn't win down there. Doesn't look like they can win in Blacksburg either. So you hate to see it. You hate to see it, guys.
Well, you and I
what does this mean, though? Because there's some actual news that comes with this now that they fired him before the game 4 mark, correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty crazy time. Like, Taylor, you and I were kind of joking around. 3 head coaching roles potentially could have been open in the state of Virginia after the season. Here's one of them. Yeah. They've only played 3 games, number one. So each player has the ability to still redshirt and retain another year eligibility. And according to the NCAA rules, when a coach does get fired, players have a 30-day window to enter the transfer portal. So I'm curious what that's gonna look like here as they're trying to find an interim head coach, keeping the roster together. I think Brent Pry's final comment on the interview last night was he felt that he recruited a talented team to be able to progress. Looks like those players are now available And I'm curious what's going to happen after that.
So the question is which of those players can step up a level to the Sun Belt, like a team like JMU and Old Dominion, worthy of an increased level of competition?
They've got a couple kick returners I think could be interesting, right? We were talking special teams offline, maybe some folks to provide us some depth. Exactly. Who can step up to play for JMU? I think it'll be an interesting targeted list.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. And also UCLA firing their coach as well. So we'll be intrigued to see what happens to former friend of the program and friend of JMU, Tino Sinceri. Does he get an elevated role? Does he where does he find himself in this mix? It has not been a good start to his tenure out in California. So it's something to watch as well. Guys, a lot of different ways people kind of spent the bye week. Some players got away from football. Some players traveled home. We got a chance to see that AB3 took in some football in Charlottesville, which was always interesting to see online. There was some interesting banter about that on sites like Twitter. I'm just curious where everybody's head's at now that you've had kind of a week away from what transpired in Louisville, and now that we're less than 7 days out from what is a huge matchup again. If we want to get positive thoughts back into the program, start to build some momentum with some tough matchups around the corner, where is everybody's heads at? Go to you first, Michael.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think calmer heads have prevailed. Emotions have simmered quite a bit. I think we can come away from the Louisville with the positive thoughts in mind, but also the fact is college football is drunk right now. Right. I think we're seeing the outcomes from the transfer portal, and everything we've ever wanted is still out of us. Right. Miami takes down USF pretty handedly. App State loses to Marshall 2.0, aka Southern Miss. Arkansas, out of all places, hangs well with Iowa State. Tulane beats Duke. Right. Like when they traded quarterbacks. Louisiana can't throw the ball. I mean, I think everything we want as a program is still in front of us, which is what I took from last week. I think we all came away very frustrated with the performance, and I think we've all watched the game maybe 2 or 3 times since up until the third quarter. But I think everything we want and what we can control is still ahead of us.
Yeah, there's not there seems to kind of be forming a top half of the Sun Belt and a bottom half of the Sun Belt. I don't think we've seen that in recent years. I think Texas State has looked good. I think South Alabama hanging with Tulane close last week, and then they hung with an Auburn team this week. I think South Alabama, obviously Texas State, how they've performed. I think they looked good against Arizona State, and obviously their win against my Roadrunners. I think they've done well. And then you mentioned Arkansas State. I'd say kind of maybe the jury's still out on them, but it does seem like a lot of the difficult is on the West, except in the East. That Old Dominion game last night. I mean, they dominated Virginia Tech, and this was a Virginia Tech that, they kept it very close with South Carolina until the end of the game. That first half, they were dominating Vanderbilt, and so I don't think Old Dominion. This wasn't a case of kind of like when JMU played a bad East Carolina team, back 2017, 2018, or even a bad SMU team. I mean, this was a decent Virginia Tech team that I still think could maybe, I would have said they could probably still go 5-6, 7-5, but you don't know right now with the coaching situation. But Old Dominion's looking strong, and it just makes things exciting because with Virginia Tech playing the way they are, UVA is still TBD. Obviously a program record in offense against William and Mary. They looked good a week win against Coastal Carolina, but Coastal hasn't looked good. That loss to NC State, I don't really know where UVA is. I think it's fair to say Virginia Tech is clearly at the bottom of the FBS grouping in Virginia, and we have a chance to go head to head against Liberty and Old Dominion to really make a run for who's the best team in the Commonwealth.
I think that October 18th
monster games though. Yeah, I was about to say that game in Harrisonburg now. I mean, it was always going to be big, and I think we were all going to be excited about it. But now, with a potential for that to be a Sun Belt championship for all intents and purposes, or at least a Sun Belt East title, is going to be massive. And then I circle from this weekend that Texas State game now on a Tuesday night in Texas has me rethinking. What possible plans for travel can I make to get out to Texas State? Because those are 2 monster games. The other game I saw this week is Washington State not looking so great against North Texas. So again, that's another opportunity for this team to get a big win, at least in terms of going towards our end goal, because that program looks like they've got a lot of work to do before they make their trip to Harrisonburg.
And we were pretty bullish with Washington State, right? I think we were talking about how they brought a lot of the South Dakota State players, after I think they were either in the championship game of the FCS or won it, we thought it was going to be a pretty solid program. And, after having a close game versus Idaho and just getting, I think it was 45-0 at halftime versus North, something along those lines. I mean, you got to figure out how good is the American, right? Does ECU beating Coastal 38-0, right? At Coastal, are they better than we think, et cetera? It's all over the place. And also going back to ODU, Taylor, we kind of joke around. ODU has a very nuanced offense, and I think they showed you exactly what they can do to a team when they don't come prepared. Because I think that's what it was. Like Tech, that defense was running around with their head chopped off, and they didn't know what to do. And I think that quarterback for ODU, he's a good athlete, and he can show you he can throw a good ball if the play is there, and he's got good feet. That's going to be a crazy matchup in Harrisonburg. Maybe we break another home record. I think they were a home record back in 2023 attendance record, if I remember correctly.
And I was looking on the site yesterday because someone was asking about Old Dominion tickets. I think I saw, and I'm not being hyperbolic in this, I think there were 7 tickets available. I think they were all. It was 2 sets of 2 and a 3 set over on the new midfield Godwin side seats. So for all intents and purposes, that game is sold out. Georgia Southern game is sold out. I would be shocked if we don't have another year of sold out JMU football, assuming that the Dukes continue to play the level of football that people expect.
Well, all I can tell you is our friend Barry Sanamon, who manages the tickets for Section 109, says he has 22 outstanding requests to get into 109 for the ODU game. And I have a feeling that number is only going to grow as we make our way closer to that game. So should be interesting. Glad you have your season tickets. This is why you sign up early. I just, my last thought before we get into the preview of this, though, is Liberty has struggled, obviously, the last 2 weeks, but we cannot overstate the importance of this game. And I think that's kind of as a primer for this discussion is there may be some players out there in JMU universe who don't understand because they're new to Virginia or new to Harrisonburg and the traditions that come with this, just how big this game is. And I want to give each of you a chance, just kind of personally from your perspective, and then I'll share mine. Why is this game, outside of just the name, which we can get into later, of this rivalry, but why is this to you individually such a big matchup? Because there's so many ways you could take it.
I'll give my opinion first, is that it's rare where you have an opportunity where some of the best FBS football in a state is being played by the G5 programs. So, a lot of times you think of a place like Texas, and again, yes, I'm going to reference UTSA, UTSA, Texas State, even Houston back before they moved up to the Big 12, UTEP, North Texas, SMU before they moved up. You had a lot of good teams, but it's like no one's ever going to top Texas and Texas A&M and TCU. We're in a unique position where Virginia Tech is at the 10-year run of just bad, mediocre football. UVA is coming out of maybe what has been a very low point for their program, but again, kind of to be determined. But Liberty is coming off double-digit wins for, I don't know, it's probably 4 or 5 years now. They obviously had that appearance in the Fiesta Bowl. Old Dominion not only coming off the big win last night, but, they're the ones that they have a winning record against Virginia Tech and Norfolk. And right now they seem to be arguably maybe the best team in the Sun Belt on paper right now. So you have and we get to face both Liberty and Old Dominion in that year. So there's an opportunity for JMU when it comes to recruiting battles, when it comes to perception of the media in Virginia and how JMU is covered. This is an opportunity for the G5 programs and the G5 college landscape in Virginia to really take over as the best football in the state for not only now, but set the precedent for what the next few years are to come.
Yeah, I'll double down on that and just provide more color. Where else also in the country where you find 2 programs also separated by 68 miles, right? So I think however you feel about the matchup, however you feel or whatnot, whether the Blue Ridge is actually located between them or not.
One program's in the Blue Ridge Mountains, one's right outside.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a crazy one, right? To your point, you've got a UVA program where their ceiling is probably fifth or sixth in the ACC. A Virginia Tech program, which last year, remember, they were all high on a college football playoff hopeful, and then they end up choking versus Vanderbilt, which sets a spiral at the end of the season. You got to figure out where's the level here, and you've got 2 programs that are well funded, have high expectations, at least at our side of the table, for that college football playoff seed, and also to win their conferences. And I'll tell you too, from a personal standpoint, as someone that when I was in school, we played Liberty. We played them a few times. I got to see them a lot. I think back when they had I think Danny Rocco was their head coach. We had some very animated games back and forth between the coaches. You're looking at a team, and also Liberty went up to FBS without an invite, and we all looked at that as like, WTF? Like, why did they get to go as an independent? Obviously, end up in the Conference USA, and then we waited for our turn. Right? There's a lot of emotions going into this game, and looking at the last time we played was 2014, where we lost 26-21 in, I think, the second round of the playoffs. There's still a sour taste in a lot of our mouths that was there live, with not only the outcome from the field, but also the interactions across the fan bases, words that were said, that weren't said, you name it. There's a lot of bad blood, whether you like it or not, between these two programs, regardless of the perception between the two universities.
Well, and I want to add on to that, because the thing that really, there's two things that really bothered me about this program, and it all stems back from our transition period. One, when they were giving JMU such a hard time for the Attorney General, who is a JMU grad, going to bat for JMU, and they were making fun of lawsuits and all these things, which actually did not happen on our part. But again, to your point, Liberty did not have a conference invite, which was required to move to FBS, and it was only through antitrust monopoly lawsuits that basically the NCAA said, all right, we're going to let you in. So that's number one, and the hypocrisy of those two arguments. Number two is going back to that year where we had our 11-1 season. Liberty was not a guarantee to get that NY6 bid, and they were going up against a bunch of 10-2 or 11-2, because they won their championship, 11-2 or 2 lost conference championships at the G5. So there's no doubt in my mind, if JMU had had the opportunity to play in the Sun Belt Championship, to beat that Troy team and only have 1 loss, we would have had the opportunity to have that NY6 berth that they had. So there's kind of what is considered their biggest success is something that I feel the NCAA did not give us the chance to play for. I'm not saying it was ours guarantee, but it was something to play for. And then just the hypocrisy of kind of the whole lawsuits and what was the term that Steve made famous? I'm blanking on it now. It was the term of, it was the phrase of the year. If I remember it, we'll say it later in this. Maybe producer Chandler can figure it out during the show. But anyway, that to me, those two things to me are why getting to play this team for the first time in 11 years, it kicks off now, as we know, a 10-year stretch of games.
2040. We're the first scheduled college football game in America.
JMU is
a true PR move, by the way, because I saw so many different groups pick up on that, which I thought was cool. That's at least one element of it that I was like, to get us some more buzz. My reason for this
that are going to be playing in 2040. Like, let's just think about that.
But my last thing to add to this is you can't overstate the impact that this can have on recruiting. I had the honor to talk to a number of our commits this summer who had signed up with JMU, and to a person, every single one of them had a Liberty offer for the most part. And so there is a significant amount of overlap between the players who are going after. So anytime you can get a win against an in-state program that is aggressively seeking the same talent that you are is massive. It's not everything, but it really can set the tone in a big way for recruiting success. But with that, we're going to bring on somebody who knows a lot more than just the three of us do about Liberty. And the more we can bring in people who can offer their perspective, it makes for a better conversation. We're going to bring in Bryson Gordon from the News in Advance. Bryson, thanks for taking some of your Sunday to join with us for what I think should be a fun discussion about this matchup coming up on Saturday in Lynchburg. Bryson, before we get started, give us a little bit of info into your background and how long you've been at the News in Advance.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys having me on. It should be a heck of a week. I'm really excited. I can't wait to see the Liberty fans. I can't wait to see the purple, the JMU fans in Williams Stadium. This is going to be a heck of a week. So a little bit about me. This is my second full season covering Liberty. Like I said, for the Lynchburg News in Advance, we're the daily newspaper here in Lynchburg. And I've had this honor, like I said, for 2 years. It's really fun. This year for Liberty has been, I would say, not even up and down. I would say it's just been generally down. But, just in terms of the, talking that I've had with the fans, the ability to cover the team and go to practice and go to these games. And this is a job that I went to college for, and not necessarily a specific one, but I wanted to get into the field of sports journalism. And so have this opportunity. Like I said, I worked at the News in Advance for quite a few years. I've been here since 2021 in total. Actually, I started out as a city council reporter. And so it's been quite the change here in the last couple of years, moving into the sports side, which I'm so excited about. Liberty is my primary, coverage. Is what I usually primarily cover for the News in Advance. Also touch on high school sports. I think if you work for a daily newspaper, everybody's got to touch on the high school sports these days. So I do a lot of high school football also, and then do Liberty basketball, Liberty baseball in the spring, Liberty softball. They have a really good program there. But football feeds everything, and I'm sure it's the same way for you guys. Football is king around here at Liberty as far as what people consume. And so, like I said, it's been a down and up and down season, but it's been a fun one already so far.
Yeah, Bryson, thanks for hopping on your Sunday afternoon and welcoming you onto the show. So I think let's talk high level here, right? So they've played 3 games now. I think they're 1 what's the record 1-2 for the season.
Yeah, 1-2.
They beat their FCS opponent Maine. They lose to Jacksonville State. They lose to Bowling Green yesterday. So what's like the temperature in Lynchburg right now, knowing that they should be perennial Conference USA favorites year over year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say the temperature's not quite as hot as some of the other, schools here in Virginia. We just heard Brent Pry got fired up at Virginia Tech. So obviously not as hot as some of the other places, but I certainly think, this season it's been a little bit frustrating from a fan's perspective, definitely from the team's perspective, considering, how last season went also coming off of the New Year's Six Bowl. They struggled to 8 wins in the regular season last year. They had a game canceled, but it was a little bit of a struggle last year. And then the thought coming into this year was that it was going to be fixed, right? There was so much turnover on both sides of the football. There was a really keen focus on making sure that leadership was in the right spots at positions like quarterback and along the offensive line and even on defense. And so there was a lot of anticipation for this year kind of going a little bit more like 2023 went, and it has gone, quite possibly the complete opposite this way. You mentioned their win over the FCS team in Maine in week 1. That really wasn't even the prettiest victory. I mean, it was a game that was tied 7-7 going into the fourth quarter before Liberty put together a 21-0 run over the final 15 minutes. And so I think if you're looking at it from an outsider's perspective and you watch this Liberty team, it looks pretty confounding. I think if you look at it from a fan's perspective and from a reporter's perspective and from somebody who sees the team on a regular basis, it's really confounding considering the fact that, some of the guys that were, big players on this team last year, there are some that are still here. There are a few guys that were here 2 years ago that, aren't necessarily, playing up to the caliber that they have been, at earlier points in their career. And so there's a lot of question marks on both sides of the ball. It's been a little bit of whack-a-mole for them. They've had, offensive struggles and the defenses look good. They've had defensive struggles when the offenses look good. And so that's kind of how I would generally sum up the first, 3 games of the season. Like I said, though, with this JMU game coming up and as you guys have been talking about Old Dominion, Liberty actually goes to Old Dominion a week after, JMU on the 27th. And so 2 tipping point games is what I've come to call them here, in the next 2 weeks, considering that they're staring 1 and 2 in the face with these 2 big ones coming up.
Yeah, we got a bit of a round robin thing kind of coming up with Liberty and Old Dominion and JMU. Talk a little bit about the Bowling Green game yesterday. Liberty, even after the Jacksonville State loss, I believe it was on the road and they went into that game, I believe, still 5-point favorites. So talk a little bit about, what things surprised you yesterday and what things do you think, well, it wasn't as surprising because that is a weakness and Bowling Green exposed it.
Yeah, I would say in general, going into yesterday's game, all of the focus on yesterday's game was on the defensive side of the ball. Going back to the Jacksonville State game last Saturday, a week ago from yesterday, it was probably the worst defensive performance that they've had under Jamie Chadwell in the 3 years that he's been here, especially considering the 13-1 year, his first year. Last year against Jacksonville State, they had a pretty tough day. But this year, I mean, this Jacksonville State team is not the same Jacksonville State team that won Conference USA a year ago. They really have had a lot of changes. Obviously, a new coach with Rich Rod going back up to West Virginia. And so Liberty got run over by this Jacksonville State team that, like I said, has a lot of changes from a year ago. So going into this Bowling Green game yesterday, everybody was keying in on the defense, right? We want to see, what the defense looks like. It was 22 missed tackles per PFF in the Jacksonville State game. So it was a lot of, hey, has the defense been able to figure out how to get tackles? Has the defense been able to figure out how to get off the field on third downs? Because it was a mixture of penalties and allowing some big chunk plays on third down that cost them the game against Jacksonville State. And then I think also, the Bowling Green game, there was a lot of concern still about the offense getting started faster. I mentioned the 7-7 start against Maine. That was the score after 3 quarters. It was a pretty slow start for the offense against Jacksonville State as well. They fumbled on their first drive. They had a couple turnovers in the first half. So there were things we were looking at yesterday against Bowling Green going into the game. I think, at least in my opinion, we saw a little bit of an improvement from the defense. 23 points to Bowling Green probably doesn't jump off the page as anything special, but the offense put the defense in some tough situations and some short fields. There were also some penalties from, both sides of the ball that really impacted the score as well. So I think going into the game, the defense, I was impressed a little bit with how the defense kind of turned around in a week span, especially think about Bowling Green, right? Coach Eddie George, that's a Heisman winner. They're going to want to, you turn on the film and you see 22 missed tackles, you want to run the dang ball. And get it going downhill, especially with a coach like Eddie George. And they weren't, Bowling Green wasn't quite able to do that. They outrushed Liberty by a little bit, but it wasn't necessarily, a dominant day on the ground for Bowling Green. So I was impressed by the defense, but the offense, right? And I'm sure we're going to get a lot more into it, but the offense is a huge question mark for Liberty, not just from a slow starts perspective at this point, but how can they sustain drives? I mean, they're among the worst teams in red zone offense through 3 games already this season. Anytime they get a big play, there's a flag on the field. It's a hold. It's something. It's this or that. There's nothing that's been able to get going right for this offense. And with a team like JMU, which I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot more. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a high scoring game on this upcoming Saturday. Liberty, if they're going to find themselves in a shootout, they got to have a completely different offensive perspective than they had the first 3 games.
So let's talk about that a little bit here, Bryson, because as you know, we haven't played in 11 years, but I think JMU fans are indirectly familiar with this program. Jamie Chadwell being at Coastal, Ethan Vasco, your new QB1, being at Coastal as well. How has the offense evolved, right? We were familiar with Jamie Chadwell. He kind of runs like a modern day triple option. Has that evolved or changed since Ethan Vasco has come into place? Like, what has he brought to the table or maybe hasn't in terms of his evolution as a quarterback?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think he actually brings kind of the perfect skill set to playing a Jamie Chadwell offense. I think everybody assumes you think of, obviously, Caden Salter had a really good year for Chadwell in 2023. But I think if you think of the consummate, Jamie Chadwell quarterback, you think of Grayson McCall. Just kind of that's the way, he played. He played pretty well in that, spread option kind of offense. And Vasco is a little bit of the same guy. I don't want to necessarily, he's a Coastal guy. He played in the same quarterback room as McCall for a little bit. I don't want to say they're the exact same players. There are some differences. But in terms of Vasco's skill set, I think he fits perfectly into the offense Jamie Chadwell wants to run. And he still runs the same offense. He faded away from it a little bit last year when he had Salter and Quentin Cooley, who was the team's leading running back a year ago. He faded away from as much of the option, game last year because he really leaned in on those 2 guys in the run game, and also Salter's passing abilities as well. But this year, we saw yesterday against Bowling Green, they were really active in the option game. Von Blue had a couple of touches. Juju Gray is a wide receiver turned running back this year who's really involved in the running game as well. And then Evan Dickens has been this breakout star for the team in the run game, through camp. And he had some touches in the option game yesterday. So things haven't really changed. I think the issue with them, though, is that the book is out on it now. And the talent isn't necessarily as good as it was, when you had a guy like Caden Salter or Quentin Cooley, and you could run it. We think about 2 years ago when Liberty went to the Fiesta Bowl, that triple option was so dynamic with those 2 guys and Aaron Bedgood, who was a receiver, but he played out of the backfield a lot that season. They just don't have, in my opinion, necessarily, the high-end talent to really make that, that speed element to that option game, jump off the page. Vasco isn't the speedy threat that Caden Salter was. He's also not the shifty threat that Caden Salter was in the open field. So it looks different. But when you watch Vasco play, right, he's getting the extra couple yards by lowering his head. He took some big hits yesterday, left for a second, came back in the game. But he, like I said, he is the perfect quarterback. I think that Jamie Chadwell wants to run his offense. He talked before the season whenever he was, bringing Vasco in from Coastal Carolina. Chadwell recruited him when he was at Coastal Carolina. Chadwell recruited Vasco when he transferred when he came out of high school to Kansas. He recruited Vasco whenever Vasco left for Kansas to go to Coastal, and Chadwell had left for Liberty. And then now for the 3rd time, whenever Vasco hit the portal from Coastal, Chadwell was pretty active. And I think that this time it felt like a perfect fit for both guys. I think they were really excited about, how their games lined up. Vasco said he was excited about getting into that, scheme as well. So it's been interesting. It hasn't changed a whole lot. And I think it's just the difference of it being that Vasco is more of the downhill guy as opposed to the speedy guy like Salter. And where you see that come into effect is on, short yardage plays. Liberty likes to keep the ball in his hands in short yardages. And they did that yesterday, on a 4th down play.
I've watched a little bit of both of the last 2 games. I didn't get a chance to see the Liberty main game, but the last 2 games, one thing I noticed and was curious your perspective on this, Ethan Vasco has taken some really, tough hits. The Jacksonville State game, I mean, I remember it was 2 back-to-back, one where his helmet flew off. Yesterday, early in the game, I saw him go under the tent, for concussion protocol just to check him out, see if he's okay. He ended up continuing playing in the game, but, just the wear and tear. What have you seen from that offensive line and both pass protection and when they have QB run plays? JMU, the one bright shining spot from the Louisville game is JMU's defense. I mean, they were in the backfield. They weren't getting any yards. Is that a concern for you, both the hits that he has taken and the potential defense that he faces next weekend against JMU?
Yeah, absolutely. I was, live tweeting the game yesterday. I didn't have the chance to travel this week, but I was tweeting about it. And I mentioned, you said it yourself too, Vasco has taken some hits this season. I mean, maybe it's a running style, but he's not the type to slide. And I think they were, maybe Salter was a little bit the type to do that. McCall, just kind of going back in Chadwell's, quarterback history, we know about his issues with concussions. I think he medically retired at NC State, his last season because of another head injury. So we know, we're aware of how he played. And that's why I think the comparisons with Vasco come into effect, right? He wants to lower his head. He's taken hits, and Liberty's quarterback situation has changed, already from fall camp. Ryan Berger was the backup, during fall camp. He had just narrowly lost the job to Vasco, as far as what coaches would tell us. Ryan Berger has medically retired, medically been disqualified for the season due to a rash of head injuries. He had 2 last year in a short span. He had suffered another one during practice just before the second game of the season, the first game of the season this year. And so, we weren't really sure what we were going to see out of Vasco. And now with there being one less quarterback on the roster, the quarterback situation is a little bit more unsure. But as you saw yesterday, they're not afraid of running the guy. They have a little bit of faith in Michael Merdinger, who is the backup now, who stepped in for one play in Vasco's absence. But, they're trusting Vasco to make wise decisions. And, whether or not he puts his head out there and gets it knocked around a couple of times like he did yesterday, I think that's up to him. On the offensive line perspective, I think that's really where, at least in my opinion, all of Liberty's issues have stemmed from this year. Think about the first 2 seasons under Chadwell, the offensive line was, in my opinion, the strength of the team in general. You had a guy like Caden Salter, you had Quentin Cooley, but the offensive line gave them all the time in the world to throw whenever they wanted to. They opened up run holes, in that spread option game like crazy. And so I think just in general, whenever you're looking at this Liberty offense in the offensive line, they've graded out pretty poorly. I think if you throw out the outlier against an FCS team like Maine, where they have such a physical advantage, they've graded pretty poorly in the pass block game against Jack State. They graded pretty poorly in the pass block game yesterday. The run game is a little bit better, in the blocking game. But I think, with JMU's talent and on the defensive line and JMU's talent just getting after the quarterback in general, that's going to be, the one area I think will be important, because if Vasco doesn't have time to throw, we've seen him get in the tendency of getting some happy feet in the pocket, and maybe he, throws an errant pass. He has a couple of fumbles already this season, from, trying to escape the pocket. I think of the Jacksonville State first drive, he was trying to escape the pocket and get away from a sack. And he just kind of got blasted and his internal clock didn't run out, and he, took the fumble. And so I think those are the things you got to worry about for Liberty this week. What's the offensive line going to look like? They have their 5 set, it feels like, but they're still trying to work some pieces in there on the edges. An injury to the left tackle, Trey Bodowski, he missed yesterday's game. I'm assuming he's going to stay out for next week also. So Liberty's still kind of trying to work around some injuries, but I think the offensive line not holding up will be a big reason why, if Liberty doesn't come out with a win next week. I think that will probably be why.
Yeah, Ethan Vasco, for folks, 6'4", 230. He's a built quarterback, right? I remember last year he took some hits during the Thursday night game that we had together, and as Taylor had mentioned, that offense naturally, right? You're going to be running the ball heads down. So be curious how his health, keeps up. So John mentioned earlier about recruiting, right? So let's look at the outside a little bit. Dante Lee Jr., one of your receivers. I think there was a heated recruiting battle this past offseason between JMU and Liberty for his services. I know the quarterback, the wide receiver run game, being able to spread folks out is a big part of the option. What are your thoughts on his abilities and maybe some pass catchers that JMU fans should know about?
Yeah, I think Lee has been probably the biggest revelation offensively outside of Dickens potentially for Liberty this year. And you mentioned his recruiting battle. This is his second season at Liberty. He was here last year, didn't play a whole lot, but it was a JMU Liberty recruiting battle. We came over from Division II Shaw a couple of years ago. In the offense last year in general, I think Liberty struggled to get that downfield passing game open. Dante Lee, I think last year was a little bit on the thinner side, on the skinnier side. He worked a lot this offseason to bulk up. He said he's around 195, 200 pounds at this point, which is a change from where he was a year ago. He's able to take on, the load of being a top end wide receiver, and he's playing like it. He mentioned he's got a touchdown in all 3 games this season. He's definitely the top, to take the top off the defense target because, whenever you get keen on the run game, right? Whenever Liberty's leaning on this run game so much, if you have a guy like, Dante Lee, who has that elite speed, and when I say elite speed, Juju Gray for Liberty has good speed. There are some guys on Liberty that have good speed. Dante Lee has elite speed. This is a different kind of level of speed that we're talking here. And it seems like any time that he's running down in the secondary, he's got, 5 feet of space that if Vasco can just hit him, he's going to be running in for a touchdown. So I think he's, just shy of 200 yards through 3 games. He's got, 2 really long touchdowns. I think I want to say yesterday's was a 45-yarder. The one against, Jack State was over 50 yards. And so this is a guy that Vasco has leaned on in the deep passing game. Now, when you get into third downs and when you get into short field situations, it's Reese Smith. And Smith, as of note, he left yesterday's game with a little bit of an ankle injury. He was hobbling off late. He's been a guy who's battled injuries a lot in his career. If it's simply just a rolled ankle, I would expect him to, make it back for the JMU game, just considering how many times in his career he's had to fight back from injuries. But Smith is, Vasco's go-to guy on third down. He leads the team in receptions right now. He's really shifty in the slot. A lot of times he'll, just kind of find a spot in the zone and just settle in and, give Vasco a target to hit. Smith, ironically, talks so much good about him, but he fumbled yesterday on the first drive, which was costly for Liberty. That allowed Bowling Green to go down and kick a field goal and take some early points. But I think those 2 guys are primarily Vasco's most comfortable options. Two different guys, right? I mentioned Lee's the downfield guy. Smith is the short yardage or third down guy, and then a couple other guys I would mention. Elijah Canyon has had a pretty decent year. I think, last year he's a huge guy. They tried to move him into the slot actually at 6'5", and it was an interesting look. He looked like a tight end running slot, but they run him now, at a few different spots. He's a big target for Vasco when they get into the red zone. And then one other guy that I've mentioned is Jamari Person. Jamari Person's he's a Colorado State transfer. This is his first year here at Liberty, so he's quickly built a little bit of a connection with Vasco. But I think in general, he is another guy who Vasco looks for on third downs. He just has a knack to get open, kind of like Smith. So when things are breaking down for Liberty, I think if Vasco is dropping back in the pocket, he's looking for 3, who is Jamari Person. He's looking for 6, who's Reese Smith. And so those are a couple guys I think in the short passing game next week that JMU fans should keep an eye on.
And Bryson, if you were to ask JMU fans what the talking point or the real headline from our last week of conversation is the quarterback battle here in the rotation and how that impacted the game against Louisville. If you had asked us before the season where we thought this offense would really shine is in the running game, being able to kind of use a very deep running back room to exploit teams. We didn't see as much of that running back group in our game against Louisville. We saw some good amounts of the backs in our game against Weber State. But if you're looking on Twitter and platforms like that, now JMU fans seem to be excited about being able to kind of get back on track with the way Liberty's defense has played through the first couple of weeks. Can you shine a little bit of light on what you think is going on that side of the ball? Is it schematic? Do you think it's personnel or maybe a combination of both?
Yeah, I would lean, probably more so personnel than schematic. I think this is a defense. Chad Wills in general has been, it's been solid his first 2 years in Lynchburg. I think last year there were games where the defense was the reason they won some games last year. It kept them in games while the offense was kind of trying to find its way a lot of times. This year, the main game, like I said, you want to throw that out a little bit just because it's an FCS, it's an outlier, but they did allow a 77-yard touchdown to Maine's running back. So, Liberty, marked it. They talked it down as a misfit on the run game, but the problems continued in week 2, right? It was 338 rushing yards from Jacksonville State. I mean, that's an unbelievable number, especially against a team like Liberty, who you think about Liberty under Chadwell. They have had good defense. They have been able to lean on the guys. In years past, it's been guys like TJ Bush, Jerome Jolly at linebacker. Joseph Carter is still there. He's been a huge focal point in the defense for a few years. But this year it's just been different. And I think the Jacksonville State game was a lot of just completely, missed tackles, guys failing to rally to the ball. Whenever one person has Jacksonville State has Cam Cook, who's a TCU transfer, really good running back, but he's not a guy you can tackle with one guy. And so Liberty really struggled to get after and gang tackle against them, and they made him pay. Like I mentioned, the 22 missed tackles, and it was almost 125 yards after initial contact for Cam Cook alone. And so I think in general, if you're a JMU fan, you're looking at Liberty's run game, I would be, licking my chops if I was a team facing against Liberty's defense. And that comes with a better performance yesterday against Bowling Green. I still think that there are issues in the run game, mainly because, we saw Bowling Green run for 158 yards. That's not really a team that has done well in their. They didn't really necessarily do well in their first 2 games in the run game. And so, for Liberty's perspective, the scheme hasn't changed all that much. There were some packages yesterday where they ran some 4-down linemen and 3 linebackers, which is a little bit different from them. But I think that maybe was just a mix of who they were playing up against Bowling Green. Typically, they like to run 3 linemen with a joker. A joker is kind of like a hybrid, defensive lineman, linebacker. And the starter at that position is C.J. Bazille. He's actually, kind of battling a little bit of a foot injury at the moment. So Brenton Williams is taking in a big role. Those are some guys that I would watch out for. But in the run game in general, I mean, it seems like it's a lot of the personnel. I mentioned some of the guys that have left. There's been a lot of drain on the offensive line, on the defensive line. TJ Bush, chief among them. He's over playing at California right now. He was an all-conference player, his first year in Lynchburg. Jay Hardy is an Auburn transfer. He actually left Auburn to come to Liberty and then played here for a few years, and then he's now back at Auburn playing for Hugh Freeze. He left the defensive line. There's been a lot of turnover. Chris Bodie is another name. Elite Nairn is another name that Liberty lost on the defensive line. This is all during the spring portal period. This was a unit, I would say, whenever I was doing all my spring ball previews, I was mentioning the defensive line as the strength of the team, just because the guy, TJ Bush being there and Jay Hardy being there. And then these guys leave so fast. Liberty was forced to really, turn around quickly in the spring portal and fix it. They have guys, Aaron Hester is a guy who's played a decent amount on the defensive line. Donovan Dozier has played a decent amount on the defensive line. Those are guys. Dozier has been here for a little bit. Hester is a Florida State transfer who didn't play a lot there, but is trying to find his way now on the defensive line. So in the run game in general, I think it's going to be, whenever Liberty's defense is on the field, that's going to be what's most important. I think Liberty does a phenomenal job, and I could look like an idiot. Next Saturday if JMU's quarterback goes out there and throws for 300 yards. But Liberty has done, in my opinion, a phenomenal job in pass defense. Their secondary is veteran. Their secondary is really good. It's really strong. It's very versatile. They have guys that can play pretty much safety, cornerback, doesn't matter. They play pretty much any position in the back end. So the defensive line for Liberty against JMU, when Liberty's defense is on the field, that's going to be the unit. If they can get any sort of initial push and try to tackle some JMU guys in the backfield, that's what's going to be key. Because if JMU's running backs get downhill, get a little head of steam, going towards Liberty's second level, we've seen them be, susceptible to missed tackles on a regular basis at this point.
Bryson, stepping away from the X's and O's a little bit, talk a little bit about the fan perspective, particularly the Liberty fan base. We kind of talk about how the Sound Off is a fan-centric podcast, so we love to kind of express the voice of the fans. Obviously, we have the newly announced Rivalry, 10-game series over a 16-year period. Would love to hear what your perception is of the Liberty fan base and their expectations coming into this game.
Yeah, I think if you had asked me before the Jacksonville State game, I would have said that Liberty fans were pinning this game as like the biggest game in program history for a lot of reasons. It was, very anticipated, this JMU game upcoming. I think the last 2 weeks have let some of the steam out of the game, at least from Liberty's perspective. I don't think it has it by any means for JMU. I think you're a little bit more excited to go into this game, seeing how Liberty's playing. And you might have an opportunity, to kick them when they're down if Liberty's struggles continue. But I think from a fan perspective in general, it's great for both. It's great for both programs, and it's really great for Liberty. JMU's had the pleasure. I was looking at some of the non-conference games JMU's played in the last few years. Right, they played at North Carolina and blitzed them last year. They played at Virginia. It's a really good slate of non-conference games. Liberty hasn't had that same fortune in the last few years. They played some tough, not some tough in terms of really good opponent, but some tough opponents in terms of, man, like, why are they playing these non-conference teams? These non-conference teams aren't necessarily as good. It's gotten better this year. I think, the Bowling Green, JMU, and Old Dominion stretch for them is going to be really fun. It's 3 games in a row, and it started yesterday with Bowling Green. But getting this JMU game on the schedule is so great for them from a fan perspective, because it's so much better than the games they had before, and it gives you something. I mean, this game has juice, right? Like, if Liberty was 0-3 coming into this game, it's still going to be sold out. It's still going to be a packed house at Williams Stadium next week. And so from a fan's perspective, I think there's so much excitement to finally have these two teams playing again. You mentioned 11 years since the last matchup. And so 68 miles separates these teams. It's a no-brainer for them to be playing. It's a no-brainer for these fan bases to be button heads, all the time. Hopefully safely button heads on Saturday when they're in the same building. But I think it's just awesome. And every fan I talked to at Liberty has said, that JMU game is going to be the best game of the year. It's going to be the best game. The Liberty played BYU a few years ago. That was a, incredible atmosphere. I want to say that this game is probably going to get as close to that in terms of excitement. Attendance. I think this is probably going to push for the number 1 crowd in Williams Stadium history. if I had to guess. And so I think everything for Liberty, despite the last 2 weeks not going to plan, for Liberty and their fans, this game has been everything, ever since it was announced. And then when the games, as you mentioned, were added, this past week, I think it was like, man, like there was no better timing to make that announcement. It just completely feeds into the excitement of what we're walking into on Saturday.
Bryson, I want to ask you one more question, because anytime you see that number of games get put on the calendar up until 2040, it starts to bring up the dialogue online about, should these two teams be in the same conference? I know there's strong opinions on this on both sides of the aisle, but I've seen in a lot of Liberty circles as they've tried to project themselves in potential Sunbelt ad if another team was to leave, or some of these future ideas for what conference realignment could bring. I'm just curious from an independent perspective. First of all, how would Liberty fans, from your view that? And how would you, as somebody who covers these, see that as a potential landing ground as the school looks towards what comes next once the dominoes shift inevitably once conference realignment continues?
Yeah, I think there's a huge push from Liberty fans to get out of Conference USA. I think it's for a lot of reasons, right? We mentioned, let's be honest, quality of Conference USA. I would put it the last. I think it's the worst, Group of 5 conference in terms of football. The MAC, I think it challenges the MAC every year. I think the Sun Belt and the American and the Mountain West, of course, have a pretty good, distance between the bottom two conferences. And so for Liberty's perspective, it'd make your conference, your conference schedule incredible. I think the reason why Liberty fans want it more, we talked about these rivalry games getting added, but can you imagine if Liberty was in the Sun Belt and you get games against, JMU, you get games against Old Dominion on a regular basis? There's other regional opponents for Liberty. Think about Liberty and Coastal. They had a rivalry for years and years and years, long before I started covering this beat, where they hated each other. I still see beat Coastal shirts at Liberty all the time. And Liberty has a Coastal head coach on their sidelines. And so I think going to the Sun Belt, going to the American is kind of in the same boat, where there'd be a lot of good regional opponents for Liberty. I think, necessarily, Charlotte's probably not the best off the top of the head, but they're one of them that's in a little bit of a short proximity. And so I think the Sun Belt's a perfect fit. I think Liberty fans would die to get in the Sun Belt. They wanted to, obviously, a few years ago. And in terms with Conference USA kind of being where it's at, before I joined, you guys were mentioning, Conference USA and Liberty and what it was 2 years ago, whenever Liberty made the Group of 6. They really were able to make that. They had an incredible team, but being able to play against that schedule, and that was a reason, that they made the New Year's 6. And I think also on the flip side, it probably was an argument for them not to make the New Year's 6, was because they played that Conference USA schedule. And so when you look at that going forward for Liberty in the way that the college football playoff, is currently set up, and I'm not here to say that Liberty is anywhere near going to a playoff berth, but just for, the way that the playoff berth is given out, I think Liberty being in a conference like the Sun Belt would do so much more for its profile, as opposed to being in Conference USA, where I think if you're trying to make the playoff out of Conference USA, your floor is being undefeated in the regular season. I don't think you can necessarily afford, 1 or 2 losses from the Conference USA and then be able to make an argument as being the best Group of 5 team. And then just one little quick aside on, realignment. Everybody knows Liberty's AD Ian McCall, from a very veteran AD. He was at Baylor for a long time. He's been at Liberty for almost 10 years now. He's very active. Obviously with his profile in the college sports, I think he's always active in keeping Liberty's name out there. And I think the last couple of years have done well for the program in terms of national profile. This year kind of being forgotten about that, with them being 1-2, but last year was still a pretty good year, even though they were 8-4. Obviously the Fiesta Bowl the year before that, they've had a good run since coming into FBS in general. And I think whenever they first came to FBS and were looking for a conference, maybe it was tougher to be like, are we really going to take a chance on this little school from Lynchburg, that has a huge online population that, I want to say, 15, 20,000 of residential students. We really want to take a chance on that team. Now, when Liberty comes in and they have a couple good seasons and continue that momentum, I think it makes it a little bit different. And I think that's potentially where a guy, an athletic director like Ian McCall is trying to hang Liberty's hat on. It's like, maybe we didn't have, the opportunity to get into a big conference at first, but now, we've put together some good years. We've had some success. We beat a team like BYU. They went to the New Year's 6. They've had some, really good games in these few years. So I think that's where they're trying to start, build a resume here in Conference USA. Maybe a few years. I mean, we don't know what college football is going to look like in 12 months. So, we could have 2 conferences for the Group of 5 teams in a couple of years. So there's no telling, but I think McCall, with his history, with his, kind of name brand power, that he carries from a really long career in college sports, I think he's always active and trying to keep Liberty top of mind for some of these conference commissioners.
Awesome. Bryson, before we let you go, what are your stories that you're working on this week as you kind of plan out your roadmap for coverage, and where can people read your stuff if they want to get more into this rivalry?
Yeah, hit all my stuff at newsadvance.com. That's where we post everything. I'm also available on Twitter at Bryson Gordon, which is my name. And I post all my stories there, try to do some Liberty commentary there as well. Hoping, knock on wood, to do some content with the DNR, the Daily News Record this week. I'm out in Harrisonburg. Try to get some, Ask a Beat Writer stuff, some excitement, for both teams kind of going around with this big rivalry game coming up. And so I'm going to be focusing on, potentially a little bit of the history between these two teams. I know they haven't played in 11 years. We've already written well about what they're going to be playing, how many times they're going to be playing in the next, 16 years. I can't guarantee that I'll be around for that 2040 game. Maybe if we are, we can all meet up in the press box.
You should all be so lucky.
Yeah, but it's going to be all kinds of coverage. And then, if you're a JMU fan, you want to learn a little bit more about Liberty, we run a first look of the game on Wednesday, which is usually a matchup and a player to watch. And then we completely cover the game on Friday as an advance, and then notebooks throughout the week, and then Saturday game coverage.
Awesome. Well, Bryson, thank you. Your perspective is incredibly valuable, as I know fans are now turning their attention to what, again, is going to now be a game we're going to be excited about for years to come. So thank you for your perspective. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to running into you when we get to Lynchburg.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. I can't wait. Hopefully it will be a fun one this Saturday. Hopefully we at least get a close one or an exciting one.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Bryson. We'll talk to you soon. All right, guys. Good perspective. It was interesting because there is another side to this rivalry that I believe. One thing I've always thought with Liberty fans is they're clawing for respect and clawing for their position in this Group of Five landscape. And games like this can go a long way to giving them what they want. On the other side of the equation, this is an opportunity for JMU to kind of silence some of that and really go in with some swagger and show people where we stand at the Group of Five pecking order, and I believe it should be interesting. Guys, I wanted to shift gears now to an off-topic segment because I think it's a good transition before we go into some other things we have planned for the show. Michael, you kind of raised this issue. Is there was some news in college football about some potential changes to the transfer portal? I'm going to give you a chance to kind of set it up, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So long story short, there's going to be a vote here next couple of weeks to eliminate the spring transfer portal and create a single 10-day transfer portal that would open on January 2nd, 2026. So a lot of big implications there. And quite frankly, the way this topic came up is, I had the privilege to be on the Alpha Dog retreat and got to speak with some of the coaches. And I think this is the same sentiment across all the G5 and even in the P6 level or P4 level is, it creates a tremendous amount of stress when you have two periods, January and essentially April, where players can come and go, right? And we're seeing it now. It's very difficult to have continuity, obviously, already in college football. It's very difficult to build chemistry. We don't have a preseason like there is in the NFL, which is probably what happened to Bill Belichick a couple of weeks ago versus TCU and seeing that mesh come together. So I think this is an important decision. And quite frankly, in this new age of what modern college football probably looks like, it's probably beneficial for a team like JMU. And honestly, talk about a wealth of knowledge from Bryson, by the way. Like, wow, I just learned so much about the school in Lynchburg. But they talked about it, right? The defensive line looked fantastic. And then April comes around and they lose 3 or 4 of their defensive players to, I'm assuming, SEC bags. What happens when all those decisions are made at the start of the year? And as a head coach or as a general manager or as an AD, you now have 12 months at least to really, or maybe more like 9 months, to right size, to understand who you have and be able to gel the team, right from the bat.
Yeah, and I think for me, it also, if you could make it so it's one window, I can't overstate, I feel like the impact that has on, from a coaching perspective, the amount of stress and anxiety that must come from, you think you have your roster laid out, you think you have everything put in a position where you're going to be successful, and then the rug is pulled out from you, from under you after spring ball and things. It just would take so much of that out of the game and allow fans on the other side of it to be excited for once about your roster and to maybe lose some of that anxiety that comes with, all right, man, I felt really good about spring ball, but what's going to happen in the weeks to come? So that to me is something that I think is going to provide a little bit of calm in what's been kind of a hurricane over the last couple of years in college football, and something that I think I struggle, other than maybe from a player perspective, of seeing who's going to necessarily be against this issue, because it seems like, at least from a coach and administrative perspective, this is a no-brainer. And then obviously fans are who are going to want that continuity and certainty, which I think is so valuable when you start to plan and just get excited for what you might have around the corner.
Well, I'll provide a little bit of like a antithesis or counter argument to this. I think puts a lot of pressure on the support staff as well. Think about this, right? Like if you're in a bowl season, or knock on wood, we're playing for a New Year's Six or college football playoff. It's a lot of responsibility in a 10-day window to identify targets, to do what we call roster management, right? And see where the holes are with the team, who has a spot, who doesn't. All that has to happen super fast once the regular season finishes. And given the time between bowl games. So I'm sure we'll still see opt-outs. It might not be as crazy as before or whatnot. We'll see what happens this time around if it passes. But think about the emphasis on, Cliff, right? Cliff Wood just was announced general manager, the decisions that need to be made, the business side, the revenue share component, the scouting department. Nathan Applebaum does a fantastic job identifying and working tirelessly for the program. But all of that gets accelerated because it's not like you have a spring to be like, okay, who can play or not? Because quite frankly, we brought a lot of players in January that we found out very quickly in the spring, especially in the spring game, they can't play at this level. Right. And so we had another round of attrition in addition. So all of that just gets accelerated super fast, but at least it's happening one time versus multiple times in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, I'd say maybe the only downside is if you did have a coaching change. I mean, you think about if there's a coach who leaves for another position and then you find yourself, they leave before the bowl and you're looking at a 2-week sprint to the end of the year to try to, first of all, hire that coach, then deal with your high school recruiting that's going to still be going on that fast, and then also try to then account for what's going to happen in the portal. That would be something that obviously could throw a program like a JMU into a little bit of a tough situation, which makes doing your due diligence, having your list of potential candidates that much more important if you find yourself getting to the end of the year and you think your coach is a candidate to leave. But obviously all of this is subject to, could we see lawsuits that come out of this as well? There's I feel like a number of different things that come into play if this is something that gets passed, but it's something that we're going to have to watch because it would have significant impact on our roster for years to come if this is the way it works out. Any last thoughts you have on this, Michael?
Yeah, you brought up a good point, right? You've got early National Signing Day in December. That's something we have to think about too. And I believe National Signing Day is still in February. So for a team like JMU that still leans heavily on high school recruiting, on bringing in talent to develop, what does that mean from a numbers perspective when we bring in transfers from other programs, et cetera? Also, like on top of all this, like you're right, it's a big what if. I think they're expected to vote on October 1st. So there's still a couple weeks. We don't know the outcome from this, what's the trickle down effect, et cetera. But it's something that we should look at as not just a fan base, but as a program. And JMU, I think, has shown a track record of being proactive with these types of measurements. So I'm sure it's something that Roan and co have been evaluating now for months, if not weeks.
Awesome. Good discussion, guys. Taylor, I'm going to turn it over to you because you're going to introduce what we think is going to be a pretty fun new addition to the show. And the floor is yours.
Well, we always talk about, the show being for the fans and everything. We talk about folks our age, talk about the college students. We never talk about the kids. JMU has a lot of kids fans. So we're bringing on 2 kids today. One is my son, James, and his buddy, Owen. James and Owen, they joined us in the new on-field end zone suites earlier this year. So they got to experience the game from the field. So before we start the new segment, I do want to kind of give both Owen and James. Owen, I'll let you go first. Yeah, tell everybody what you're holding in your hand and tell everybody what your experience was like on the field in the new end zone suites.
I'm holding the coin that the referees flip on the coin toss.
So you gave the referee, they were walking out in the field, you were giving them high fives, and they pulled out the game, the coin they do the coin flip with, and gave it to both you and James. So hold that up. It's a big gold coin for everyone that's listening, has all the team logos, pretty cool coin. You can't buy that, can you?
Yep.
All right, so Owen, how did you enjoy the game? What was your experience like in the suites?
It's like really cool, but it's like you can, like at halftime, you can go give like players fist bumps and like stuff, and that's all I can say.
I mean, that I remember being a kid, that was the favorite part of the game. James, what was your experience like? What was your favorite part being on the field?
Just being close to the players.
Did you see Jacob Dobbs?
Yes.
Jacob Dobbs, when James went to meet the Dukes last year, Jacob Dobbs did a photo, put his helmet on James. So James was very excited to hear that he's still going to be on the coaching staff. So we're starting a new segment. This is called Kid Picks. We'll see how it goes. I gave both Owen and James the chance to pick a game other than JMU and give their prediction. And then after that, they're both going to predict the JMU Liberty game. So first, I'm going to kick it to Owen. Owen, what is your, other than the JMU Liberty game, what is your game of the week that you wanted to pick, and who do you think is going to win?
I'm gonna pick Clemson over Syracuse, 44-30.
40. Okay. High scoring game.
Um,
Do you feel? Go ahead.
If Klubnik gets that Heisman, then he might be the best.
Okay, I think that's a great point. Well made, high scoring game. Sounds like it could be a shootout. Clemson over Syracuse. All right, James, you had the chance to pick a game other than JMU Liberty. What game did you pick?
Roadrunners and Colorado State.
UTSA plays Colorado State, the Roadrunners. James, what makes UTSA special? Who do you think is going to win that game?
UTSA, because my dad worked for UTSA. I was born in Texas, and Roadrunners are better than Rams.
Roadrunners are better than Rams. You can't argue with that pick. But now for the pick that everyone is waiting for, big game on the schedule next weekend. JMU at Liberty. Haven't played in 11 years. The new Battle of the Blue Ridge to kick off a 10-game series against these two teams. Owen, tell me who you got. What's the score? Who's going to win the game?
Easy, JMU.
Boom. Give me a score. How much JMU going to win by?
50-10.
Boom, 50-10. And Afton Soderman is not on the episode today, but Afton will appreciate that prediction because I believe Afton said we're going to put up 50 points on Liberty. So, James, who do you have winning the JMU Liberty game, and what will the score be?
The score will be a lot, and JMU has to win. That's because
you're right, James. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
JMU has to win because of the best team ever. I don't think you can argue with that. Now, we did talk about the new series, they announced the new 10-game series. It will end in 2040. So, Owen and James, Owen, you just had a big birthday party, so you just turned 7, correct?
Yep.
And James, you are 6. You'll turn 7 in a few months. So in 2040, Owen and James, do you realize, Owen, you will be 22 years old? James, you'll be 21. Both of you will likely have graduated or almost graduated college when this series concludes. So this weekend kicks off a very long run of games between JMU and Liberty, and this game is going to set the tone for that whole series. So do you guys I'm going to kick it to John, our host.
Yeah, I want to ask
you a quick question.
My kids, if they were on this Kids Picks segment, would say their favorite thing about JMU football games is the candy they get. So I'm curious, Owen, I'll go to you first. What is your favorite thing from a kid's perspective about going to a JMU football game?
It's like the sweets. It's like the sweets and the dog walk.
The dog walk. All right. And the floor is yours. Taylor, your son. What's your favorite thing about going to a JMU game other than being with your dad, which is pretty cool? What's your favorite thing?
Dog walk and
you're live.
And being there with your mom too, because you've got a pretty cool mom.
Say it again.
Buc-ee's.
We have another Buc-ee's fan. So dog walk and Buc-ee's.
Dog walk, and obviously the moms when they come, because that's awesome too. So we love the whole family.
Obviously. Well, James and Owen, you guys did you guys are YouTube stars now. I know that's a big thing for you guys. So you guys can catch this on YouTube. You can send it to your friends. But I want to thank you guys for both being on the first ever Sound Off Kid Picks. We hope to have you back sometime.
I have something to say also.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Go Dukes.
There we go. Nicely done, Owen.
Go
We'll have you back soon, buddy. Good job, guys.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Awesome.
That's fantastic. I think that might be my favorite segment now.
Future podcast host. Now we got to find more kids. I got to get my kids are dance and everything right now.
Podcast hosts, feature alpha dogs, feature suite owners, you name it.
Those kids will be in their early 20s when this JMU Liberty series concludes. Yeah.
It's way cooler to say that for them than we talk about what we will be at the start of the 2040.
We won't do that. Nope.
No comment.
A lot more gray hair. That was awesome. Well, guys, transitioning that's gonna be a little bit tough, but want to go to really quickly. I know we wanted to kind of just do a final around the horn thing for what each of us are hoping to to see from JMU going into this week against Liberty. I'll kind of start with you, Michael. I have a feeling I know what direction you're going to go to, but if there was kind of like a headline that you're looking to see for when the Dukes take the field in Lynchburg, what's it going to be for you?
Yeah, actually, I know we're supposed to do one thing, but I have two things, right?
We
yeah,
control what we put out there. It's fine.
The first one is a little bit more off the field, right? So, I remember in 2022 when we finally played ODU after losing to them, I think in 2010 and 2011, and then jumping off the Conference USA to never see us again. I was just so angry, right? I was a student. I was so mad. How the hell did we lose to this startup program? And I wouldn't say it's as bad a level of malice, but I have the same feeling because I was in the stands in 2014 when we lost 21, or was it 26-21, Vadley's first year, Everett Withers. The program was getting totally turned around under a new administration. And I just remember that sour taste and seeing the sea of red. Oh my gosh, can't believe I said that on live air. The sea of red all across Bridgeport Stadium. And I was just like, holy crap, how the hell did we lose this team? And it's been 11 years. So I think from an off the field perspective, there's a lot of emotions in this game. I think both programs have, to their credit, right, accelerated their programs at a high level. And now I can't believe, right, we're talking about two programs that are opting for the college football playoff spot, right, which I think is fantastic for the state of Virginia. And as someone that, I've played at Williams Stadium in high school, those were the good old days. And I know players that have played for that program before. It's cool to see on their end, but we got to beat them. Right. It's been 11 years. I got to take that sour taste out of my mouth because at the end of the day, when a Liberty fan talks to you, all they want to talk about is that 2014 game and that, we never gave them a shot on the field. And I talked about this a little bit last week when I kind of did a little bit of a one-off exclusive from Northern Bucky's. I want us to establish an offensive identity, right? I think that's just what it is. I want to execute a clean offensive game plan. I want teams to know when they play a JMU team, what type of team are they going to be facing? Are we going to sling the ball around and be a spreaded team like kind of what we were last year? Are we going to be pound the rock, right? Are we going to give it to our stable of backs? Are we going to be, like our friends Delvin and Vad said on their show, are we just going to be Team Matt Sluka and just run the hammer right down the middle, play over play, and let our defense win the game, right? So I think we have a bye week. It's an entire week to really self-scout, look in the mirror, and we did the same thing last year post Gardner-Webb, and we all saw what happened, but I think at the end of the day, what we decide and what we commit to offensively will dictate our quarterback one, the rotation, whatever that looks like. But I just want us to come out with, we are JMU. This is how we play offense. And I look at what ODU did last night versus Virginia Tech. And I hate that I'm even saying this. ODU, we all know they're sort of a spread team. They sort of run like a gimmick triple option. They ran that offense versus Virginia Tech and they won. I think they maybe ran one or two non-traditional trick plays, maybe, but they ran their offense versus a Virginia Tech program and they won the game. No one can say otherwise. And I think that's the sour taste we all have in our mouth after Louisville, is that we did not play JMU football on offense. We didn't. We played JMU football on defense, but we did not do it offensively, and we lost the damn game by 2 scores. So that's all I want. I want us to play JMU football on offense, establish identity, and we will win or lose with it. I'll leave it from there. Taylor, you're up.
Yeah, on the field, we're 4 weeks into the season. I still don't know what this team looks like. And I think a lot of JMU fans, if they're honest, they don't know, for the ones that are like, oh, I already know what's going to look. You don't, because we played an FCS opponent. We did not game plan that game like we are the rest of the games. Then we played this Louisville team projected to compete for the top of the ACC. We didn't game plan that game like we're going to game plan the rest of the games. I still think we're trying to figure out how they use Alonza, how they use Sluka, how they use JC Evans. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the 2025 JMU football team still looks like. And so that's why I have a lot of cautious optimism, because again, I have a lot of faith in this staff. I would say on paper, we have the talent. So I'm kind of anxious to see what that finally looks like when we go against what I would consider a peer G5 program. I think we have a little bit of an advantage because we have 3 games of Liberty tape to look at. And I think we are going to know the Liberty team coming into next week. And I don't think there's going to be a ton of surprises. But I don't think Liberty still knows how to prep for this JMU team. I would suspect there's a lot of things that JMU has probably prepped in the last 2 weeks that we haven't seen on tape yet. I still think they're trying to figure out the personnel. So I think we have the advantage that Liberty's going to be guessing a lot more than we are coming into this game. As it relates to off the field, I'm going to preface this with, in the FCS, we didn't have any named rivalries. We hardly even had rivalries. I mean, we had Richmond, but you went down to Richmond. Their fans didn't care about JMU, William and Mary. You can throw Delaware. But now we're at the FBS level, and we now officially have 2 named rivalries. I know there's a third one, maybe Grassroots, that Marshall's been trying to kind of been talking about, but still, we're at a position where we have named rivalries. That's something we've always wanted. And I want to give a lot of credit to JMU and the administration for the work that they put into creating this. I just have a couple of gripes with it. I'm going to be the old man yelling at the sky. One, they're not in the Blue Ridge. They're not in the Blue Ridge. And people can say Lynchburg is just as close to the Blue Ridge. Listen, JMU is in the Blue Ridge. You go into the Blue Ridge, you're in the valley of the Blue Ridge in the Allegheny. If you're watching the show, we have the map up there. They're not in the Blue Ridge. Number 2, I feel like I've seen a lot of fans calling for a battle for the Blue Ridge to be labeled the App State JMU game every year. That's a conference game. We play them every year. They both have Blue Ridge roots, and it just seems like it would have been more fitting there. And number 3, I feel like Liberty needs this rivalry, or Liberty needs for it to be a rivalry more than JMU needs for it to be a rivalry. You guys keep count of all the UTSA counts. Here comes another one. When I was at UTSA, we were Conference USA. Houston was still in the American. They hadn't moved up yet. We split games 1-on-1 with Houston and UTSA, and there was a series of games where UTSA was like, "Hey, Houston, we should start this. It's a rivalry. We're close. We're Texas, And Houston was like, no, because they were like, look, clearly our programs are kind of on the same footing because we both we split the games against each other, but it's like we're not looking to come down there. And while if I take the purple glasses off, look, from a facilities, from a budget, from a competition, Liberty's competitive with JMU and probably every school in the Sun Belt, but their conference isn't, so I do kind of feel like Liberty needs this to be a rivalry more than JMU does. But maybe my hatred of the rivalry is what feeds into the rivalry and makes it a great rivalry. And I want to beat him into the ground. I want no mercy. I think, what was it? Owen said 50-10. I think Afton in his preseason predictions predicted 50. I think last week, John Butler, we had on here, he said, we're going to run up the score. So yeah, let's, and I do believe earlier today, the line came out, opened up 12.5-point favorites for JMU as a line from the betting world. I think that's very fair. I think that's a good line. But personally, I hope that it's a lot more than a 12.5-point victory come Saturday in Lynchburg.
My view of this is pretty simple. Like I'm actually going to throw all the records out. I don't care what Liberty's done before this game, because if you take off your purple colored glasses and look at this, for a team that's reeling like Liberty right now, there's no better way than to right the ship than to knock off JMU at home in front of your fans in a game that means everything, not just in the short term for your program, but potentially in the long term. So to take that as a context point to where I want to see from JMU is I want to see the swagger back that we saw against Weber State, a program that we talked about, the defense that was out there playing on a different level. I want to see that same thing from the offense, to go into that stadium and say, we are the best program in Virginia, and we're going to show you why. What is the JMU standard? What does it look like? I want that same standard from our fans. I want our fans. There are probably going to be some Liberty tickets that are going to go on sale this week because of what they've done in the last couple of weeks. If they're out there, buy them. If you're a JMU fan that's trying to get into, go there, show respect, show dignity to their fans, be polite and respect the rules that they have on campus, but show this program why we are the top program in the group of 5, or the top program in general in Virginia football, and leave no doubt. That's really what, for me, I want to see is I want the score to indicate who the top program is, and then act like we've been there before and not make it a game that we're sweating out into the fourth quarter. We are capable of doing that. We have the personnel to do that. We have the coaching staff to do that. This should be a game that we can prove to everyone in the state where we belong and where we are in the pecking order. And then we can look at what comes after this, because that's when things really fire up. This is a game we must win, and we should leave no doubt. And I believe that that's something that this program has every component necessary to make that happen. But let's not take anything for granted. What's come before this game does not matter. and our program has the ability to do what it takes. So that's what I want to see. That's my final thoughts. But I have full confidence in this program's ability to do that, and that's really what it comes down to. I want this team to play with the same swagger. Go back and listen to Nick DeGennaro's interviews from this week. That's kind of what I want to see. A kid who has full confidence in what this offense can do, a kid who has full belief in what this program is capable of, and he's new to Harrisonburg. He's new to JMU football, and I thought he's really summed it up in his conversations better than really I've heard anybody, at least I have, in any of the rigorous interviews or anything we've seen all season. So, guys, with that, any kind of fast thoughts? I know, Taylor, you're going to be in town. Chandler and I are going to be in town. There's a Duke Club event for those who are going to be making the trip. That's going to be at McAdoo's right before. So if you haven't gotten your tickets to that, you can do that on the JMU Duke Club website. But yeah. Any final thoughts from you, Michael? Is there a possibility that you find a last minute flight? I'm saying it's got to be more than 0.
I think there's some flirting going around with maybe doing a quick in and out into Lynchburg. I know I'm in near St. Pete, so there is a direct flight into Roanoke, if I looked at it correctly, which Taylor, gave me the lesson. It's not that close, but it's close enough.
It's a suburb of Botetourt.
Where? Daleville?
It's a suburb of Botetourt.
But Daleville is
Daleville is in. Courtney needs to study geography, much like Liberty does, because they're not in the Blue Ridge. But continue.
Or do they not have a mountain? Don't they talk about being on a mount or something like that too? There's that conversation. Either way, we will see, John. We'll see. Might be a game time decision. I come in late.
I have a feeling we're going to be seeing you in the stands.
Little 8 a.m., little 6 a.m. flight on Saturday. Get out of here by 10 o'clock. Who knows?
I'll see you on Saturday, buddy.
Okay.
Yep. Awesome. And with that, Taylor, drive safe. Enjoy your week. To our fans, thank you again. We continue to see the growth. Comment below on any of our social threads. We'd love to see what you're hoping to get out of this game. We might do another giveaway. We've been doing a lot of giveaways lately. We've got some more mugs. We've got some more things for some of our other sponsors. So stay tuned. Shoot a comment below or a subscription. And yeah, you never know what you're going to get from the JMU Sound Off family as a way to say thank you. Shout out to our sponsors again, Skyline Financial Partners. Remember, you can empower your family for lasting financial success at SkylineFinancialPartners.com. Champions Drive Bourbon. Get your bottles now at select Virginia ABC stores at abc.virginia.gov as well as championsdr.com. Where's Woody? Remember, as soon as you see this episode, 48 hours you have to get 25% off the entire Where's Woody website. Purple Nation, you can find all their merchandise online at yourpurplenation.com, as well as at the Purple Nation stores that are littered around Virginia. Shoker Enterprises, the Dead Meat Society. You can join the grilling enthusiast movement at deadmeatsociety.com. Outdoor Kitchen Creations. You can learn more about what they can do to your backyard kitchen at backyardtrends.com. And then our new sponsor, Valley Road Vineyards. They are the official Virginia farm winery of JMU Sound Off. The next time you're near Afton, Virginia, right off of I-64 between Harrisonburg and Richmond, let them know that you listen to the show, and you can get 50% off your wine flight. And with that, that's going to do it for today's episode. Safe travels to those who are making their way up to Lynchburg. If you can't be there, find some Dukes to watch this game with. This is a big one, and we hope to be back next Sunday celebrating a JMU win on another episode of JMU Sound Off. And with that, go Dukes. We'll talk to you guys soon.